When the forensic expert opened the Nazi medical cabinet, the child's heart, floating in preservation fluid, was still beating 76 years after the war ended. Dr. Eleanor Wright couldn't believe what she was witnessing. A human heart, no larger than her fist, suspended in yellowish fluid, contracting and expanding rhythmically, as if it had never been removed from its owner. She stepped back, the glass jar trembling in her gloved hands, as the organ continued its impossible movement, sending ripples through the viscous liquid. The discovery had occurred in the basement of an abandoned medical facility near Auschwitz-Birkenau. The Polish government had commissioned a team of international forensic experts to document and catalog remaining evidence of Nazi medical experimentation. Dr. Wright, a renowned forensic pathologist from Oxford University, had been working methodically through a sealed storage room when she encountered a heavy metal cabinet, its lock corroded but still intact after decades of neglect. "I initially thought the movement was an optical illusion," Dr. Wright later explained during her testimony before the International Historical Commission. "Perhaps a trick of light or a natural reaction of the preservation chemicals breaking down after so many years." But when she called over her colleagues, Dr. Tadeusz Kowalski, a Polish medical historian, and Dr. James Berger, a forensic chemist, they confirmed what seemed impossible. The heart was indeed beating with a slow, steady rhythm. The scene that unfolded next would haunt the investigation team for years to come. As the three experts stared in disbelief, Dr. Kowalski collapsed to his knees, crossing himself repeatedly and muttering in Polish. Dr. Berger turned away, vomiting violently against the mildewed wall. Only Dr. Wright maintained her composure, though witnesses noted her hands shook so badly that another researcher had to take the jar from her before she dropped it. The heart belonged to a child, approximately 8 to 10 years old based on its size. But what made the discovery even more disturbing was the small brass plaque affixed to the bottom of the jar. Engraved in meticulous German script was a name, Eliza Weiss, alongside a date, 12 May 1943, and a clinical identification number, specimen 347B. But the impossible beating heart was merely the beginning of what would become known as the Auschwitz preservation anomalies. As the team continued their investigation, they uncovered an entire collection of preserved organs that defied all scientific explanation. Lungs that still expanded and contracted slightly, as if drawing phantom breaths. A pair of eyes in solution that would track movement in the room. Most disturbing of all, a preserved section of human brain tissue that, when connected to sensitive electrical equipment, continued to produce measurable neural activity. We are dealing with something that challenges the very foundations of our understanding of human physiology, Dr. Wright stated in her preliminary report. These specimens have been separated from their circulatory systems for over 7 decades. By every known scientific principle, no biological activity should be possible. As news of the discovery spread, theories multiplied. Some speculated about advanced preservation techniques lost to history. Others suggested experimental Nazi research into cellular regeneration had yielded results far beyond what modern science had achieved. The more supernaturally inclined whispered about souls trapped in bodily fragments, unable to find peace after violent deaths. The truth, when it began to emerge from declassified SS medical files, was far more disturbing than any speculative theory. Documents recovered from the personal archives of Dr. Wilhelm Heinz, an SS physician assigned to Auschwitz, revealed a research program codenamed Project Ewigkeit, Project Eternity. According to Heinz's detailed notes, the Nazi regime had become obsessed with finding methods to extend human life indefinitely, not just for general knowledge, but specifically to create an immortal elite who could lead the Third Reich for centuries rather than decades. Most chilling were Heinz's descriptions of his selection process for test subjects. "The Jewish children provide ideal specimens," he wrote in one entry dated April 1943. "Their youth ensures maximum cellular resilience, while their expendability allows for necessary experimentation without concern for preservation of the host body." The journal entry dated May 12, 1943, the same date marked on Eliza Weiss's heart specimen, contained a breakthrough announcement. Today, we have achieved what was previously thought impossible. Through the combination of the electrical stimulation protocol and the enhanced preservation solution, formula E16, we have maintained autonomous cellular activity in an extracted organ. Specimen 347B continues to show contractile function 6 hours after extraction. The Reichsfuhrer will be most pleased. But what science could explain how these specimens remained active more than 70 years later? The answer came in the form of a weathered leather-bound notebook discovered behind a false wall in the same facility. The book contained formulas and procedures unlike anything in modern medical literature, combinations of chemicals, electrical treatments, and other more disturbing components. The preservation fluid contains human blood plasma, specifically the blood of young children, mixed with mercury compounds and organic material that we're still working to identify, reported Dr. Ivana Petrovich, the toxicologist who analyzed the solution. But the chemical composition alone doesn't explain the continued biological activity we're observing. There's something else at work here, something we don't yet understand. That something else became clearer when the team discovered a smaller adjoining room that had been sealed since the war. Inside were the remains of what appeared to be an elaborate electrical apparatus, with copper coils and glass tubes arranged around a central platform. Scattered notes revealed this to be what Dr. Heinz had called the energization chamber, where preserved specimens were regularly treated with vital energy to maintain their function. But what truly sent shockwaves through the international scientific community was the discovery that the chamber had remained operational all these decades, drawing power from an unknown source and continuing to emit low-frequency electromagnetic pulses at regular intervals. Whatever Heinz and his team discovered, Dr. Wright concluded in her second report, they created a self-sustaining system that has continued to function long after they fled or were captured. These aren't just preserved specimens, they're part of an ongoing experiment that never ended. The implications were staggering. If Nazi scientists had developed technology capable of maintaining biological function in disconnected human organs for decades, what else might they have achieved? And what happened to the researchers who developed these techniques? Records showed that Dr. Heinz had disappeared during the Soviet liberation of Auschwitz, his ultimate fate unknown. As researchers worked to understand the scientific principles behind the preservation anomalies, historians made another disturbing discovery. Cross-referencing camp records, they identified Eliza Weiss, a 9-year-old girl from Budapest who had arrived at Auschwitz with her family in early 1943. While her parents and older brother were sent immediately to the gas chambers, Eliza had been selected for special research purposes. Camp records noted her as deceased on May 12th, the same day her heart was removed and preserved. But the most unsettling revelation came when researchers conducted DNA testing on the preserved heart. The genetic material, though degraded, was still identifiable. And when compared against an international database of Holocaust survivors and their descendants, it produced a match. Rachel Weiss, an 82-year-old woman living in Tel Aviv, was Eliza's first cousin. When informed about the discovery, her reaction was one of horror and disbelief. "How can her heart still beat?" she asked through tears. "How can part of her still be alive when we mourned her death decades ago?" Compounding the mystery was Rachel's revelation that her family had experienced inexplicable phenomena for generations. Since the war, the women in our family have had the same recurring dream: a young girl in a blue dress, standing in a laboratory, pointing to her chest and saying, "It still beats, it still waits for you." We thought it was trauma, a shared grief passed down through stories. We never imagined it could be Eliza actually reaching out to us somehow. This claim might have been dismissed as the understandable emotional response of a family confronting historical trauma, except for what happened next. When Rachel Weiss entered the laboratory where Eliza's heart was being kept, multiple witnesses reported that the heart's beating pattern changed dramatically, accelerating for several minutes before returning to its regular rhythm. Equipment recorded a 62% increase in electrical activity emanating from the specimen. "It recognized her," whispered Dr. Kowalski, the color draining from his face as he watched the monitors. 76 years later, and it somehow recognized her. The investigation took an even darker turn when members of the research team began experiencing unexplainable phenomena. Dr. Berger reported waking to find his bedroom floor wet with what appeared to be preservation fluid, though no source was ever identified. 3 separate research assistants resigned after claiming to hear a child's voice whispering in German when they were alone in the laboratory. Most disturbing was the case of Dr. Petrovich, who was found unconscious beside the preservation tank one morning, with no memory of how she got there, and mysterious numerical sequences written repeatedly across her forearms in her own handwriting. We have to consider the possibility that what we're dealing with isn't just a scientific anomaly, Dr. Wright admitted in a private communication later leaked to the press. These specimens aren't just preserved. They're somehow connected to something that transcends our understanding of life and death. The question is whether we're observing some unknown biological process or something that enters the realm of the metaphysical. The international response to the discoveries varied wildly. Scientific publications approached the findings with cautious skepticism, while religious leaders from various faiths issued statements about the sanctity of life and the importance of allowing the dead their proper rest. The World Jewish Congress demanded that all specimens be given proper burial according to Jewish tradition, while research organizations argued for continued study of this unprecedented phenomenon. Amid the controversy, another unsettling pattern emerged. Records of other Nazi doctors who had worked alongside Dr. Heinz showed that an unusual number had lived to remarkable old age, despite having been middle-aged during the war. 3 were confirmed to have lived past 100. And one, Dr. Klaus Eckhardt, was reportedly still alive at 115, living under an assumed identity in Argentina. When Mossad agents finally located Eckhardt in a remote villa outside Buenos Aires, they found a man who appeared no older than 70, surrounded by medical equipment similar to what had been discovered at Auschwitz. Most disturbing were the jars, dozens of them, containing what looked like small pieces of preserved human tissue, each connected to an elaborate system of tubes and electrical wires. During his subsequent interrogation, Eckhardt revealed the true horror behind Project Evkite. The preservation of the organs was never the main goal, he explained with the detached calm of a man discussing ordinary research. It was merely proof that our methods could maintain biological function indefinitely. The organs are anchors, you see, anchors for life energy that would otherwise dissipate upon death. According to Eckhardt, the Nazi research team had developed a technique for extracting and preserving what he called Lebenskraft, life force, from their victims. By keeping certain organs functioning through their preservation methods, they created vessels that could store this energy indefinitely. But the purpose was never mere preservation. Dr. Heinz discovered that this preserved life energy could be transferred, Eckhardt continued, his eyes gleaming with unsettling pride. A simple procedure, nothing more invasive than a blood transfusion, allows the recipient to absorb the Lebenskraft, rejuvenating their own cells and effectively halting the aging process for approximately 10 years per transfer. This, he claimed, was how he and several other former Nazi doctors had managed to extend their lives far beyond normal human lifespan. Each preserved specimen represented not just a horrific act of murder, but an ongoing theft of life energy from the victim, a form of vampirism that transcended death itself. The children were always the best sources, Eckhardt added, displaying a complete absence of remorse. Their life energy was more concentrated, more potent. One child could sustain a transfer recipient for a decade or more, while adults typically provided only 3 to 7 years of rejuvenation. The investigators were confronted with a moral quandary unlike any in modern medical ethics. If Eckart's claims were true, then the preserved specimens weren't just remains. They contained some essence of their original owners, artificially maintained in a state between life and death for over 7 decades. Verification came from an unexpected source. When Dr. Wright and her team conducted advanced brain scans on the preserved neural tissue, they detected patterns that were shockingly similar to those of conscious thought. The tissue wasn't just electrically active, it appeared to be thinking. This violates everything we know about neuroscience, Dr. Malik Hassan, a neurologist called in to consult on the case, stated in his report. Consciousness requires an integrated brain structure with billions of connected neurons. This specimen is merely a segment of frontal lobe tissue, yet it's showing organized electrical patterns consistent with cognitive processing. It's as if the consciousness of the original person has been fragmented but not extinguished. Further tests revealed something even more disturbing. When exposed to stimuli related to the Holocaust, photographs of Auschwitz, Nazi uniforms, or spoken German from that era, the neural activity in the tissue sample increased dramatically, suggesting emotional responses similar to fear or distress. We have to consider the horrifying possibility, Dr. Hassan concluded reluctantly, that these preservation techniques didn't just maintain cellular function, but somehow trapped aspects of consciousness within these tissues. In effect, parts of these victims have remained aware, on some level, for over 7 decades. This revelation prompted immediate calls from ethics committees worldwide to end the research and provide proper burial for all specimens. But a faction within the scientific community argued that if the consciousness of these victims was indeed preserved, then destroying the specimens might constitute a second death, or worse, might prevent these fragmented souls from ever finding peace. The debate became moot when, exactly 7 days after Eckart's confession, all the preserved specimens simultaneously began to deteriorate. The child's heart beat faster and faster until it ruptured. The preserved eyes clouded over within hours. The neural tissue ceased all activity. Despite researchers' best efforts to maintain the preservation conditions, every specimen across multiple research facilities degraded beyond recovery within 24 hours. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Speculation ran rampant that Eckart's confession had somehow triggered a fail-safe mechanism in the preservation process, or, as some suggested, that once the truth was revealed, the trapped energy or consciousness was finally able to escape its unnatural containment. But the mystery deepened further when, 3 days after the specimens failed, Dr. Eckhart was found dead in his cell. Despite 24-hour surveillance and no access to any means of suicide, he had died suddenly in his sleep. The autopsy revealed a body that had aged decades overnight. The corpse appeared to be that of a man well over 100, with advanced tissue degeneration consistent with extreme old age. It's as if all the years he had stolen suddenly caught up with him at once, remarked the medical examiner. In the aftermath of these events, investigators made one final chilling discovery. Hidden within Eckart's personal effects was a small notebook containing names, hundreds of them, each followed by a date and a number. Comparing these records with historical documents, researchers determined these were names of victims whose life energy had been harvested. But the list didn't end with the war. The most recent entry dated from just 6 months before Eckart's capture. More disturbing still were references to something called the Continuation, apparently a network of former Nazi scientists and new adherents who had continued Project Ewigkeit's research in secret facilities around the world. Eckart's notes suggested at least 7 such locations, from South America to Southeast Asia, each housing preserved specimens and continuing the life extension procedures. We cannot confirm whether Eckart's claims about other facilities are true or merely the delusions of a deteriorating mind, Dr. Wright stated in her final report. But we must acknowledge the possibility that what we discovered at Auschwitz was merely one instance of a larger, ongoing atrocity, one that may continue to this day. International intelligence agencies launched investigations into the locations mentioned in Eckart's notes, but by the time they reached these sites, they found them abandoned, equipment removed, records destroyed, and any preserved specimens long gone. Only trace evidence remained, confirming that the facilities had indeed been used for medical purposes, but offering no proof of ongoing experimentation. The case of the beating heart and the other preserved specimens from Auschwitz officially remains open. The scientific findings have been sealed by international agreement, with access restricted to a small committee of researchers bound by strict confidentiality agreements. The specimens themselves were finally laid to rest in a private ceremony attended by representatives of the victims' families. Yet questions persist. If Nazi scientists indeed discovered methods to preserve life energy and consciousness beyond death, has this knowledge truly been lost? Or does it continue in secret, with new victims fueling the unnatural longevity of those willing to commit the ultimate atrocity? Some point to statistical anomalies in missing persons cases near the locations identified in Eckart's notes. Others note the curious longevity of certain wealthy individuals who have connections, however distant, to former Nazi scientists. But without concrete evidence, such theories remain speculation. What isn't speculation is the effect these discoveries had on those who encountered them. Dr. Wright resigned from her position at Oxford and now lives in seclusion in rural Scotland, refusing all interview requests. Dr. Berger suffered a nervous breakdown and spent 3 years in psychiatric care before taking his own life in 2019. Dr. Kowalski became a monk, entering a closed order that maintains a vow of silence. Even those peripherally involved report persistent nightmares of beating hearts and children whispering from specimen jars. Perhaps most haunting of all is the testimony of Rachel Weiss, who reported that after the specimens deteriorated and were properly buried, the recurring family dream of the girl in the blue dress changed. Now she smiles, Rachel said during her last interview. She no longer points to her chest. Instead, she puts her finger to her lips, as if sharing a secret, and says, "They think it's over, but some are still beating. Listen for them." Independent researchers continue to investigate unexplained disappearances in regions identified in Eckart's notes. Occasionally, reports emerge of unusual electrical consumption in abandoned medical facilities or of elderly individuals who seem to reverse their aging process overnight. Government agencies officially dismiss these as conspiracy theories, yet Interpol maintains a classified task force dedicated to investigating what they term continuation events. The most recent development came just 8 months ago, when a night watchman at a medical storage facility in Brazil reported hearing a rhythmic thumping sound coming from behind a locked door. By the time authorities arrived, the room had been emptied, with only a small puddle of yellowish liquid remaining on the floor. Analysis showed it to be similar in composition to the preservation fluid found at Auschwitz. The beating heart of Auschwitz serves as a grim reminder that some horrors never truly die. They merely wait in the shadows, preserved by evil too profound to comprehend. The Nazi doctors may have found a way to extend life, but in doing so, they created an abomination that defies the natural order and mocks the very concept of humanity. Do you believe that fragments of consciousness could remain trapped in preserved tissue, aware but unable to communicate for decades? And what would you do if you discovered that someone close to you had unnaturally extended their life through such horrific means? If this story disturbed you as much as it haunts those who investigated it, leave a comment with the words "still beating" so we know you made it to the end. Subscribe to our channel for more historical horrors that challenge the boundary between documented fact and unimaginable nightmare. The truth is often darker than fiction, and some secrets are still waiting to be uncovered.